In a mansion by a lake in Michigan, a letter sat on a table. Nobody opened it. The man it was addressed to was old, blind, and one of the richest men in America. He knew who sent it. He knew it was an apology, and he refused to let a single soul read it to him until the man who wrote it was dead. What could happen between two people that you'd rather die than hear one of them say sorry? Here's the part that gets me. The man who wrote it wasn't a rival. He was his brother. And their last name is sitting in your kitchen right now on a red box on almost every shelf in America. Kellogg. Two brothers invented the most famous breakfast in the world. Then they spent their lives trying to destroy each other. Let's follow the trail. Chapter 1. The House That Doesn't Add Up. Drive out to Gull Lake in southern Michigan, and up on the highest ground over the water, you'll find a Tudor mansion. 15,000 square feet, stained glass, imported tile, a windmill, a greenhouse, a boathouse, private shoreline as far as you can see. The man who built it called it the cottage. And right away, something doesn't add up, because the man who built this palace didn't grow up rich. He grew up with nothing. He was told his whole life that he was slow. He sold brooms door to door as a boy. And for the best years of his life, well into middle age, he wasn't a tycoon at all. He was a servant. So how does a servant end up building a mansion he jokingly calls a cottage? And why, when he finally had all the money in the world, did he seem like a man who couldn't enjoy any of it? Here's a clue. When the landscapers told him to plant young trees that would grow beautiful over the years, he refused. At my age, he said, you can't wait for trees to grow. So he had full-grown trees ripped out of the ground somewhere else and hauled in and planted whole. Think about what that tells you. This is a man who had spent his entire life waiting for his turn, waiting to be seen. And now that it was finally his turn, he could not stand to wait one more second for anything. His name was Will Kellogg, and to understand who he was waiting on all those years, and why it turned into something close to hate, we have to go back to where these two brothers started. A town that was, frankly, one of the strangest places in America. Chapter 2. The town that was waiting for the end of the world. Battle Creek, Michigan, in the 1860s. On the surface, an ordinary little town, but underneath, something odd was going on. This town had become the headquarters of a church that genuinely believed the end of the world was coming. Not someday, soon, any day now. They were the Seventh-day Adventists. No meat, no coffee, no alcohol, no tobacco. They believed your body was a temple you had to keep spotless, so you'd be clean and ready when the Lord came back to end everything. That is the world these two boys were born into. Their father made brooms and had 16 children. 6 of them died young. So these kids grew up surrounded by religion, by fear, and by death standing right there in the doorway. The older brother, John Harvey, came first in 1852. Sickly, half a ruined lung, but sharp as a razor, and the church noticed him, decided he was special, paid to send him to medical school. Then the younger brother came along in 1860. Will, number 7 of 16, and nobody paid him any attention at all. Now here's where the mystery of these two really begins. Because the way they got treated as children makes no sense until you find out the secret. Everyone thought Will was slow, dim, a disappointment. His teachers gave up on him. His own family gave up on him. But Will wasn't slow. The truth was simple, and nobody bothered to check it for years. The boy couldn't see the blackboard. His eyes were bad. That's all it was. But by the time anybody figured that out, the damage was done. At 13, they yanked him out of school and put him to work selling brooms. His brother was headed to become a famous doctor. Will was headed door to door, and in 1876, the two paths crossed again in the worst possible way. The doctor came home to run a health institute. He needed someone to keep the books, run errands, do the grunt work. And 16-year-old Will walked in the door to take the job. not as a partner, not as a brother. As the help, that arrangement was supposed to be temporary. It lasted 25 years, and what went on inside that building for those 25 years, that's where this story turns dark. Chapter 3. What was really going on inside the SAN? They called it the SAN. Short for sanitarium, a word the doctor actually made up himself. From the outside, it looked like paradise. 30 acres, gardens, crystal chandeliers, Persian rugs, people strolling the grounds. The rich and the famous came from all over: presidents, Henry Ford, Thomas Edison, Amelia Earhart. This was the place to come and get healthy. But walk the halls long enough, and now and then, from somewhere down a far corridor, you'd hear a scream. We'll get to the screaming. Because behind the chandeliers, Dr. John Harvey Kellogg was running something much stranger than a health resort. Picture the man himself, 5'4", dressed all in white, white suit, white shoes, and a white parrot riding on his shoulder as he pedaled a bicycle around the grounds, barking out notes to Paul while scrambling behind him with a notepad. And his ideas about the human body. Some of them were genuinely ahead of his time. Fresh air, exercise, vegetables. He got a lot right, but then there was the rest. He was convinced nearly all disease started in the gut, so he built a machine that pumped 15 quarts of water through your insides in a single minute. Every patient got it, every single day. He gave it to himself twice a day for most of his life. He believed you needed good bacteria in there too, so he prescribed yogurt, half of it eaten and half of it, let's just say, going in the other direction. There was a chair that shook you 60 times a second, cabinets of blazing electric lights, and that screaming down the hallway. That came from his deepest obsession of all, because more than the gut, more than anything, this man was at war with pleasure, with desire, with sex. He married a woman in 1879 and, by every account, never once shared a bed with her. Separate bedrooms, their whole lives. And he spent that life writing books and giving lectures warning people that any kind of physical pleasure would rot them from the inside out. What he did to try to stop it, especially to children, was cruel and harsh, and I'll leave the worst of it alone. Just understand the core belief, because it's the key to everything. This man was certain that rich, tasty, exciting food stirred up sinful desire, and that plain, bland, flavorless food would keep the body quiet and pure. Hold on to that. Because that one strange belief that flavor itself is dangerous is about to accidentally create the most famous breakfast in human history. And the twist is, the doctor didn't invent it. The servant did. In the middle of the night, by making a mistake. Chapter 4. The mistake that changed breakfast forever. The doctor was stuck. He needed a food bland enough and soft enough for patients with wrecked teeth and ruined stomachs. His first big attempt was a granola so hard a patient bit into it and cracked a tooth. He tried to buy the recipe for shredded wheat and got turned away. Dead end. And then, one night in 1894, the servant made a mistake. Will was in the kitchen, exhausted, trying to work out a new dough for the patient's breakfast. He boiled up a batch of wheat, and then he left it sitting out overnight. Forgot about it. A simple, tired slip-up, the kind that usually earned him a lecture from his brother. But the next morning, that stale, ruined dough did something nobody expected. When Will ran it through the rollers, it didn't come out as one sheet. It shattered into thin little flakes. He toasted them. They came out light, crisp. Put them in milk and they went soft and sweet. The patients went crazy for them. People who'd left the SAN wrote letters begging for boxes to be mailed to their homes. And what Will had made by accident, at midnight, out of a mistake, was quietly turning into something the two brothers had never planned for. Not a treatment anymore. A product. Something you could sell to the whole country. And the second there was money on the table, a question appeared that had been hiding under this whole family for 25 years. Who does this belong to? The famous doctor whose name was on the building, or the invisible servant who actually made it? You already know they couldn't both win. But before we get to the war, I have to clear up the one thing you think you already know about this story. Because it's a lie, sort of. Chapter 5. The lie you've been told. You've heard it. Everybody's heard it. That corn flakes were invented to stop people from touching themselves. A repressed old doctor, so obsessed with purity, that he cooked up the most boring cereal on earth just to kill the human sex drive. It's a perfect story. It's funny. It spreads like wildfire. And it's not quite true. Here's the honest answer. Corn flakes were made to help people chew. That's it. The sound was full of people with bad teeth and weak stomachs, and a dry flake softened in milk forced even a fast eater to slow down. That was the real, boring, mechanical reason. So why won't the other story die? Because it's not entirely wrong. And that's the unsettling part. The doctor really did believe bland food killed desire. He wrote whole chapters on it. He built his entire menu around it. So no, a bowl of corn flakes wasn't literally an anti-sin device, but it came straight out of the mind of a man who spent his whole life trying to make your body a duller, quieter, less pleasurable place to live. The flake was never the point. It was a byproduct of one man's war against pleasure itself, and now that war was about to move out of the kitchen and into a courtroom. Brother against brother, over a single word. Chapter 6. The servant finally strikes. For 46 years, Will took the notes and kept the books and swallowed every insult. But he understood something his brother never could. The doctor thought the flake was medicine, keep it pure, give it away, protect it. Will looked at it and saw the truth. Regular people don't want medicine for breakfast. They want something that tastes good, so in 1906, the servant finally made his move. And he committed what, to his brother, was the ultimate sin. He added sugar. He added salt. He made it delicious. Then he bet everything. He spent a third of his startup money on one single advertisement, telling housewives to go wink at their grocer for a free box. It sounds ridiculous. It worked. In New York City alone, sales jumped 15-fold. And on the front of every box, he did the one thing his brother could never take away from him. He signed his own name, W.K. Kellogg. That signature is still on the box, right now. In your house. And when the famous doctor saw his little brother, the slow one, the help, become a household name off his family's name, he did the only thing a man like that knows how to do. He swooed him. He lost. So he sued again. He lost again. So he started his own cereal company, stamped the Kellogg name on it, and dared his little brother to stop him. And Will was done being the servant. Chapter 7. The war over the name. So now we've got a genuinely strange question in front of a judge. Who owns a name? Two brothers. Same last name. Both selling cereal. And a whole country grabbing a red box off the shelf with no idea which Kellogg made it. Who gets the word? The fight dragged on for 10 years. It finally hit the Michigan Supreme Court, and the trial ran an entire month. And it all came down to one question. When a regular person hears the word Kellogg, who do they picture in their head? The doctor took the stand. World famous. Books in a dozen languages. He treated presidents. For 40 years, Kellogg had meant him, and he said his little brother was nothing but a businessman riding his coattails. Then Will took the stand. Quieter, simpler. He'd spent millions putting cornflakes in front of America. His signature was on every box. When a housewife reached for that cereal, she wasn't thinking about a doctor and his machines. She was thinking about the product Will built with his own two hands. December 1920. The verdict came down. Will won. Completely. He got the sole right to the Kellogg name on cereal, and his brother was ordered to hand back every dollar he'd made off it. Total victory. And here's the haunting part. It fixed absolutely nothing inside him. Because after the win, the brothers barely spoke again. When business forced them into the same room or made sure another person was always there, he would not sit alone with his own brother. 25 years of being the help. 25 years of running behind a bicycle. He'd finally won in front of the whole world, and it didn't make him happy. The anger just moved indoors and settled in for good. He had the company. He had the name. He had everything he'd waited his whole life for. And that's exactly when the real tragedy started, because winning was about to cost him every single person he had left. Chapter 8. The Curse on the Family. Here's a sentence Will said late in life that stops you cold. As a boy, he said, I never learned to play. And once you start looking, this whole family feels almost cursed. Start with his grandson. In 1913, little Kenneth fell out of a window and was hurt for the rest of his life. He'd need care forever. Something broke in Will that day, and it quietly changed everything he did with his money after. Then his son. John Leonard gave the company 17 years. He invented the wax paper that keeps cereal fresh in the box. He held over 200 patents. He was the heir, the obvious one. And in 1925, Will fired him. Not over the work, over his personal life, a divorce, a remarriage, a business deal Will took as betrayal. Will could not forgive disloyalty in anyone. So he cut his own son out of the company and out of his life, and the two of them never spoke again. So Will turned to a grandson, John Jr., to carry it all one day. But the weight of it crushed the young man. He got demoted. He broke down. And in 1938, he took his own life. Sit with that for a second. The man built an empire to feed millions of families, and his own was falling apart around him, one person at a time. And in the middle of all that loss, Will did something you wouldn't expect. He started giving the money away. $66 million. More than half of everything he owned. All of it aimed at children, their health, their schools, their food. He built one of the first schools in the country for disabled kids. You can feel little Kenneth in that. He fed hungry children straight through the Great Depression. And when someone tried to call him a saint, he wouldn't allow it. I am a selfish person and no philanthropist, he said. I love to do things for children because I get a kick out of it. Then, in 1937, the dark closed in. Literally, he went blind. Glaucoma. He spent his last 10 years unable to see a thing, and still he showed up. Board meetings he couldn't see. The factory floor led around by German shepherds. When his own directors begged him to cut advertising in hard times, the blind old man told them no and raised it by $1 million instead, because he understood something they didn't. Hard times are exactly when you fight the hardest to be seen. He'd built something that would outlast every one of them, and he'd ended up completely alone to enjoy it. His son's gone. His grandson's dead or broken. His brother, across town, still his enemy. Which brings us, finally, back to that letter on the table. Chapter 9. What was in the letter? By 1943, the doctor was 91 and dying. And by then, almost everything he'd built had already crumbled. The San had gone bankrupt. His own church had thrown him out decades before. The great famous doctor was ending his life stripped of nearly all his glory. And in those final days, alone with himself, he thought about his brother, 37 years since Will walked out. 23 years since the court took his name away. They'd barely spoken the whole time. Whenever they were forced together, a third person always had to stand between them. The hatred had set like concrete. But dying softens a man. Even this one. So the doctor picked up a pen and he wrote his little brother a letter. And in it, he finally said the words he'd refused to say his entire life, back when he was healthy and famous and on top of the world. He admitted he'd treated Will badly, that he'd taken him for granted for decades, that he'd stolen the credit that belonged to him, that he was sorry. The letter arrived at the cottage by the lake, and Will, old, blind, unable to read it himself, said no. Don't read it to me. Why? Nobody knows. Nobody ever wrote it down, and that's part of what makes this haunt you. Maybe it was pride. Maybe 40 years of humiliation that one letter could never undo. Maybe he simply couldn't believe, even now, that his brother wasn't reaching for one last thing, so the letter sat there, unopened, on a table in a big empty house. On December 14th, 1943, John Harvey Kellogg died. And only then, only after his brother was in the ground, past all chance of ever answering back, did Will finally let someone read it to him. What crossed his face in that moment, no one recorded. Maybe regret. Maybe a cold satisfaction that the great man had finally admitted the truth. Or maybe just the hollow, sinking realization of a man who understands he waited too long, that being right was the only thing he had left, and it had cost him everything else. The two brothers who invented Corn Flakes together never spoke again. Closing the two stones. Will lived 8 more years, still showing up blind at that board table, still running the company that carried his name. When he finally died in 1951, he was 91, the exact same age his brother had been. The boy everyone called slow. He changed the American breakfast. He gave away $66 million to children he'd never meet. He built something that still feeds millions of people who have never once heard his name. As a young man, he wrote in his diary that he was afraid he'd always be poor. He was wrong about that. He died one of the richest men in the country, but he was right about the other thing. As a boy, he never learned to play, and as a man, he never learned to forgive. Go to Oak Hill Cemetery in Battle Creek today, and you'll find them. 2 headstones, a few feet apart, closer in the ground than they ever let themselves be in life. The sand is gone. The strange machines are just a story now, but the cottage by the lake still stands, where a lonely, blind old man once sat in a house full of grown-up trees he couldn't wait to plant, next to a letter he couldn't bring himself to open. And every single morning, all over the world, people reach for that red box and pour out a bowl, and they never think about any of it. The mistake in the kitchen, the stolen name, the war, the family it destroyed. Corn Flakes built a fortune. It built a mansion. It fed the whole world. The only thing it could never build was a way for 2 brothers to say, "I'm sorry," while it still mattered. If this one got under your skin the way it got under mine, stay with me. Because the next story is even stranger than this one.